This video is an interview I did with Rebel News just recently, so you can watch the whole interview, but do watch the very end of the video, because the last question was about what's the intention behind this sort of sex education in schools. And my answer wasn't very good, so I had another go at it. So if you do watch the very end, you'll hear my second attempt at what's the intention behind all this. So off we go.
The following report has graphic descriptions of a sexual nature, but if it's deemed acceptable for minors, it's acceptable for this following report.
It's the same story from the United Nations through the EU, through lots of other international bodies, and lots of national governments as well. It's been captured. And so we take it down to a school level even. So at a school level, you say, right, who wants to teach sex education? Anyone with like decent values and a sense of morality will now say, I don't want to go anywhere near that. So who does want to do it? It's the activists. And it says, put some music on and have yourself a good night. I mean, can you believe it? That's the government's official sex education resources.
This is Callum Smiles for Rebel News, and as part of a larger documentary on the sexualisation of children, I decided to speak to the leader of the Scottish Family Party, Richard Lucas, who's become an expert in the over-sexualised education system in Scotland. Here you go. Richard, thank you for joining. So I wanted to talk to you about what you've been doing with what used to be sex education, the birds and the bees biology, but is now sexuality education in Scotland. What can you tell me about that?
Well, where do we start? I mean, one problem we have with this issue is often we tell people about what's going on in Scottish schools and what the government policy is, and people don't believe us because it sounds so outlandish. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the nursery. I mean, what should be happening in nursery? Kids like playing at the water table, playing in the Wendy house or whatever. No, also the Scottish government also wants in there, LGBT content as well. So they're already teaching, all family forms are equal. There's nothing special about mum and dad and the kids. One mum, two dads and two mums. Any combination of adults, that's a family, and that's all fine. They're all equal. So that's the message right from the very, very beginning. So basically undermining the ideal of natural family life from age 3. Then they go into primary schools. I mean, already at this stage, they're getting the transgender messages. You can choose if you're a boy and a girl. Books celebrating young people changing gender, which is entirely destructive. And then the government policy alongside that, as it is in many other parts of the world, is if a child says they want to change gender, the teacher is instructed to say, basically, that's fantastic. That's really brave. Well done. What would you like us to call you? Would you like us to tell mum and dad? No? Okay, that's fine. We'll keep it secret from mum and dad. So this is happening routinely in schools in Scotland. Also, from the beginning of primary school, they start getting basically LGBT campaigning messages as well. What does the rainbow flag mean? And other slogans used by the LGBT movement. And they also start teaching about reproduction. But natural sexual intercourse is given equal billing with artificial reproductive methods as well. And obviously the thinking is they don't want it to be, heteronormative. They want it to be inclusive. So any and every way of making a baby is just given equal billing. And there's a book that's recommended that explains about how babies are made. And the message is that to make a baby, you need 3 ingredients. It's like making a cake. You need 3 ingredients. You need sperm, egg, and uterus. And basically, it doesn't matter where they come from. You just need at least one person to come up with each of those 3 ingredients. Then you put them together and you can make a baby. And throughout the book, it deliberately makes sure there's no mention of male or female, mother and father, nothing like that. Just you've got to get these 3 ingredients together, and that's how you make a baby. Remember, we're still in for under 8s at the moment. Going through primary school, and for 8 and above, they're basically taught how to have sex, pretty graphic descriptions of having sex, or what to do, how it feels, etc. Like totally unnecessary. And that includes as well homosexual sex, like pictures of like 2 men in bed, 2 women in bed. It's all equal and the same for them. I'm skipping on up to high school. Pornography, again, normal, natural, and healthy. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about watching pornography. It's a perfectly normal thing to do. Masturbation is promoted, not just talked about, promoted. Again, you might find this difficult to believe. What I'm talking about here is the Scottish Government's official sex education resources. There's a video in them about masturbation that basically finishes with a picture of some tissues and a candle, and it says, put some music on and have yourself a good night. I mean, can you believe it? That's the government's official sex education resources. It covers then things like anal sex, obviously, is presented as just an equal alternative. So anytime there's mention of sex, there's always natural sexual intercourse and there's anal sex alongside it, basically given equal billing. The dangers of anal sex are virtually ignored. And it also teaches young people about, I don't like talking about these things, but need to call a spade a spade, teaches young people about rimming, which is like licking the anus as a sexual activity, which I'd never heard of. I would have quite happily have never heard of it in my whole life. But that's what the Scottish Government wants teaching to young people in Scotland.
How young are they when they're taught that?
That's in the 15 and above thing, 15 and above. I mean, other things in the 15 and above, they show a video that sort of says anal sex is probably better. And there's another video that basically says lesbian sex is probably better as well. It's beyond the pale. But this is all there on a website. Any parents can go and look at it. It takes a bit of effort to do the research and actually come across these things. But I mean, to the government's credit, at least, it is in the open, which is why we've been able to analyze it and actually tell people what's going on. When people believe us, they're often horrified, but a lot of people just won't believe it. They say, oh, no, the teachers at our kids' school, the teachers are really nice. They would never teach anything like that. Surely not. Even when you challenge, SNP politicians and say, this is what your government is promoting, they'll say, no, it's not. No, you're making it up. That's not true. But it's there. It's there for all to see on the internet.
Have you challenged any teachers in Scotland over this?
We've campaigned on this in a whole host of ways. I mean, there's one deputy head teacher in a Scottish school who's also a drag performer and boasts about the way he promotes this sort of agenda. Here we have John Naples Campbell again. Just a reminder, John Naples Campbell has a special responsibility with the General Teaching Council of Scotland with regard to LGBT issues. He's a member of the educational establishment in Scotland. Here he is at an awards ceremony at Moray House Teacher Training College. It looks like he's thinking about applying to be a head teacher at some point in the future. He once reported a member of the Scottish Family Party to the General Teaching Council of Scotland, suggesting basically that they should be struck off, and he did that via Twitter. Right, next we've got John here making reference to what seems to be a drag queen story time that he did at a local primary school. And he talks about his assistant, Princess Consuela Banana Hammock. Now that name, there's various aspects we could talk about that, but let's just look at the last two words. Banana Hammock, that refers to basically a skimpy item of male underwear that makes it look like a banana is in a hammock. Let's just put it that way. And he's using that term with regard to his primary school drag performance. Right now, if you can't see anything wrong with that, don't bother watching the rest of the video. We've challenged him. A school in Edinburgh had a wear a skirt day where they encouraged all the boys to go to school in a skirt in order to promote inclusivity and equality. So we opposed that. Again, the council and the government were right behind the school, backed them up completely. The man who came up with the man who was given the job of producing sex education resources for Scottish schools, given the job by the Scottish government, in his PhD dissertation, he wrote about the need to break down the artificial barrier between childhood and sexuality, which sounds pretty concerning to me. I think the idea of a barrier between childhood and sexuality, that sounds just right. That's exactly what we want. But he wants to break down that barrier because he thinks trying to isolate children from sexuality harms them. So it's his mission on behalf of the Scottish government was to take away this insulation between childhood and sexuality. And there was another performer that the Scottish government used to fund a few years ago. He, she, whatever, used to dress up as a dinosaur and do this show for primary school kids about gender. And on her promotional image, it had a picture of a dinosaur on top of a pile of books. And one of the books was called Harmful to Minors. So I thought, oh, I wonder what that is. Looked it up on the internet. Harmful to Minors. The subtitle was The Dangers of Protecting Children from Sex. The dangers of protecting children from sex. And these are the people that have been employed by the Scottish government to present their message to the children of Scotland. It's appalling. I mean, there's the same issues all over the world, but I think probably in Scotland it's at least as bad as anywhere else.
I mean, that fellow in the SNP sounds like a direct descendant from Alfred Kinsey himself. How much weight is this given in the curriculum? Because like you just briefly skimmed over a lot of things there, but that sounds like, you know, a whole year's worth of education. Like when I was at school, we very briefly literally went over hygiene with genitalia, literally how a baby is made, not in as graphic senses as I've seen in the Scottish educational materials, not even just Scottish. I've seen it in educational materials around the world.
Yeah.
How much time is this given in schools, do you know?
That's a good question. The Scottish government's got a policy called LGBT inclusive education. And part of that policy is that there should be LGBT content in every subject at every level of the curriculum. So they produce resources. So in maths, there'll be a worksheet, calculate the area of this rainbow flag, for example. So the intention is there's no escape from it. You can't just withdraw your children from sex education. This is in every subject at every level, so you can't escape it. And then when it comes to the actual sex education side, I mean, that will be a few lessons a year. It will not like a huge part of the curriculum, but it's I think they normally do it in the summer term. A lot of schools do it just before the summer holiday, so they can do it. And when the parents kick off and the complaints start, everyone's on holiday, and you can just forget about it and start again the next year. That seems to be the approach. But I mean, basically, this traditional academic teaching, the Scottish government's not really interested in that. Its emphasis is on creating the right sort of citizens, people with the right values, the right attitudes. I mean, the schools, it's not exaggeration to say that they're expected to function as indoctrination camps. I mean, some head teachers, some schools, some teachers are quite resistant to that, and they just say, well, I'm not going to teach it. That's what you say I'm supposed to teach. But when I go into the classroom, that's not really what I'm going to do. But the government's intention is that schools should be presenting this sort of message.
And when did these changes to the curriculum occur? How long has this been going on for?
I think there have been serious concerns about sex education in Scotland for many decades. But it used to be, you'd hear a story about what happened in one school, or there'd be one dodgy resource, but you weren't quite sure where it was used. I mean, another source of dodgy resources is the government TV channel, Channel 4, which have churned out sort of semi-pornographic, corrupting sex education material for years, and a lot of that's been used in schools. So that used to be the situation, that we were very much aware that something was wrong, but pinning it down was quite hard. But then the government's done us a favor by saying, these are the official resources, here they are on a website, so we can just go and look at them. And we've actually written a book about them. It's in great detail. So it's all there, and it's very open. And we can just show people exactly what's happening.
What's the book called?
Corrupting Young Minds. If anyone wants to get a copy, it's £5. Just email us at the Scottish Family Party, contact@scottishfamily.org, or you can download it from our website as well. There's a download section on our website. I think it's right down at the bottom. I think it's called Sex Education in Scotland. And it's fully referenced. You can check up the internet links. Just another horror story we came across as well. I managed to get into an online training session about sex education for pupils with special needs. I had to sneak in. They tried to stop me going in, but eventually I got in sort of anonymously to listen to what was going on. And one of the teachers was basically talking about helping pupils to masturbate. So special needs pupils, we're talking about, quite severe physical and mental disabilities, who's talking about, how they can be helped to masturbate. What instruments can be provided for them to help them with this process? I mean, quite shocking. Now, an issue we have in Scotland is the media will not touch this topic. So quite often I've spoken to journalists in, right-leaning, bit more conservative newspapers, for example, and I'll say, right, this is the story, here it is, here are the links, this is what's happened, this is what's happening. And the journalist will say, all right, okay, great, I'm going to write a story. But then it will go to the editor, and then that's it. They won't publish it. It's like there's a taboo on the topic. No one will cover it, which, it's really difficult to understand.
It does scare me as to how little attention, not just how little attention this gets, but more the backlash it gets as well. You talk about how this is horrendous, and people go, "Oh no, you're just crazy." I was in London yesterday at Parliament Square, and Public Child Protection Wales had an event, and someone walked past, an odd-looking fellow, and he just shouted, "Trans rights are human rights." So I followed him, asked him a few questions. I was like, putting trans rights aside, but what do you think about the teaching of sexuality and sexual materials to children? Didn't even want to talk. And
No.
I thought, you go back 15 years, if you said this was crazy, 99.99% of the population would agree with you. It now seems like it's a very blurred line as to who agrees and who doesn't. What do you think is the intentions behind this sort of education?
I think basically the system's being captured by activists. It's the same story from the United Nations through the EU, through lots of other international bodies, and lots of national governments as well. It's being captured. And so if we take it down to a school level even, so at a school level, you say, right, who wants to teach sex education? Anyone with decent values and a sense of morality will now say, I don't want to go anywhere near that. So who does want to do it? It's the activists. It's the people whose personal decisions, shall we say, might be more in line with this teaching, and they're the ones who say, yeah, I'll do it. Then all the way up. So when the government says we need an expert on sex education, who do they look to? Would they come to someone with conservative values? Oh, absolutely not. Because the whole establishment, the teacher training establishment, academic research, etc., they're all sharing the same ideology. So when they want an expert, that's who they get. So I think a lot of the people in the Scottish government, they're not really committed to this. They don't really know what's going on. They're maybe even in their heart of hearts uncomfortable with it. They just think, oh, whatever, if this is the fashion, this is the line of this least resistance, let's go with it. And the people in the Scottish government who are thinking, this is absolutely wrong, this is appalling, they don't say anything. They don't say anything. Which is why, that's our mission with the Scottish Family Party, is to get a couple of members of the Scottish Parliament elected, and then actually bring this up. So First Minister's question time, then put him on the spot. Why are children being taught this? And then let's see how that goes. But until we're elected, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, Richard, thank you very much for your time. It's been scarily insightful, this conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's quite shocking. It's quite shocking what's going on, but the truth needs to get out there. And thank you for this opportunity to come and share a bit of the truth with you today.
Well, welcome.
I don't know, another attempt at that last question. So the intention behind this type of sex education, well, I think there's 4 strands. Number one is progressivism. So the idea that the Victorians used to be really uptight about sex, and the Victorians were wrong about everything. So the further we can get away from that, the better. So the more liberal we become, the more promiscuous, the more open we become with regards to sex, then the better that is. So that's one strand. That's how they want this presented to children. Right. The second strand is a sort of equality-based ideology. They say children are an oppressed minority. They're oppressed by adults. Adults have the power. Children need liberating from adult authority. So children need treating the same as adults. So any situation where children are not allowed to do the same as adults, well, that's not fair. Children need to be set free and allowed to do the same as adults do. and that applies in the area of sexuality as well. Very dangerous ideology as well. The next strand, I would say, is sort of science. People have got the idea of, people used to think that sex and children, that was really harmful, but now we've learned that actually it's not. Now that's absolutely untrue, but some people do believe it. And then the fourth strand is people who basically want to have sex with children, adults who want to have sex with children, and they mix in with the other people, and it all becomes part of one movement. And the people who actually want to have sex with children themselves are thinking, we like the sound of this, we like the way this is heading, and they're pushing it forward as fast as they can.